Welcome to another episode of From Garage to Growth. And this is the podcast where we look at the movers and shakers within the entrepreneurship space. And I'm your host, Brian, and today I'm joined by Dr. Houda, the co-founder of Open Startup. Open Startup is an NGO dedicated to bridging the gap between education and entrepreneurship, connecting students and recent graduates with key players within the industry through strategic public-private partnerships and a strong commitment to nurturing entrepreneurship culture within Africa and beyond. So I'd just like to give you the floor, Houda, to introduce yourself and just tell the audience who you are.
Okay, so I'm Ghozzi. I'm initially a professor of strategy in another life. And since almost, I would say, a decade now, I'm the founder and CEO of Open Startup. We're a not-for-profit that supports that's passionate about Africa, that really believes that the continent has a unique momentum to finally position. And we're supporting early-stage entrepreneurs, but also the ecosystem in general. And I've been doing this for 9 years and a half, and I'm amazed every day by the learning experience and the people we get to meet. And I'm really living the dream job. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, anytime. So what inspired the creation of Open Startup, and what were the key challenges that you're hoping to address when you initially started the organization?
So, to be honest, I wasn't at all excited by entrepreneurship when I first started. For me, it was like a buzzword, but I have to admit that I did a training at Columbia University for a week, and it was a training on how to position academia at the center of innovation. And I have to admit that it was during one of the competitions I was watching the students, and they were like so prepared, so complementary, that they were putting were like, wow. And I was really wondering how come us, Tunisia at that time, because when we first started our activities, we were focusing on Tunisia. And I was like wondering how come we didn't have the possibility to see startups that were that strong. And the answers were clear. It was a lack of exposure and a lack of openness, and that's why our name is Open Startup. And the lack of openness comes from not only openness to different disciplines, because there are countries like Tunisia where like universities are very isolated. Engineers just meet engineers all through the 5 years where they study, and you'd see like Colombia, there are 19 schools, and you're like, of course they get to meet, they mingle, they decide to build something together, and they already have the complementary skills that are necessary. The second openness was really openness to the industry. Like, you cannot isolate the university from the industry, because it is supposed to be an actor that serves and builds the human capital that is there to build the prosperity of the country. And finally, the third openness was something that we probably don't think of when we are from the Western world, which is the mobility. Like, seeing those students coming from across different countries and building something, seeing something, dreaming. I was like, wow, this is like, I would love to find a way to build something that would really destroy all those silos, and that's how we started off.
You spoke about disrupting the silos and this sense of community building specifically. How do you go about doing that within Open Startup?
The very, very first thing that we did at that time, which is always what we do, which is the method of catalyzing people around us. That is, you can't build anything if you're not inspiring people constantly. So the idea was to bring, we were a bunch of faculty at that time who sat there and said, okay, if we wanted to build a competition in Tunisia, what would it look like? And then we were speaking with the US Embassy and a foundation of a bank at that time, and a private equity fund called African Best. And we got to test this idea. And I think that the real methodology in that case is always to catalyze people, enthusiasts who will accompany you in this adventure. And I think that's what we managed to do very, very quickly. And I think also at that time in Tunisia, there was a real appetite. So it was like that right project that arrived at the superb moment that allowed us to thrive quite quickly.
And the other thing with regards to Tunisia specifically, looking at the Tunisian ecosystem, I want to talk about the initiation of the Startup Act and how that kind of catalyzed this transformation of the startup scene within Tunisia. How was that beginning, and how has that changed the ecosystem in terms of how it looks like today?
I mean, in our case, today we operate in So we have offices in Senegal and about to open the office in Morocco, and we serve 19 countries. But I have to admit that this impulsion that happened in Tunisia at that time, it is sometimes, there are some projects that, there's a magic that happens because historically, symbolically, they really arrive and land at the right moment. And I do think that OST was not only nurtured by the ecosystem, but it also in return nurtured this same ecosystem, giving back. And I think that what we were able to do through those years, and this is like, I don't think today a Y Combinator would tell you we do that much of an advocacy. But when we are in Africa and when the ecosystem is thriving, you're not only serving startups, but you end up building, for instance, more talents when it comes to the coaches. So we did training of trainers, and we trained in Tunisia around 300 coaches, which is huge. Like most of the people that we see supporting the startups today had gone through one of our TOTs that we built with Columbia University. But also, like, we have been involved in the Startup Act in two different ways. The first one was we really contributed when it comes to the education chapter, which is how to create what is needed for the academia to be part of the story and to nurture and support the story and not to be completely isolated. And one of the things that we've done with the ministry at that time, who we salute, was that he consulted us when the regulation was ready when it comes to the student entrepreneurs. And I remember we had the meeting in his office and he was presenting the regulation. The students were saying, no, please don't do this. This is not what we need. And for instance, one of the main outcomes at that time was them saying, listen, don't give us money. Don't just give us a way to have time to study and at the same time have an alternative education through the creation of our venture. And I have to admit that the ministry at that time was extremely open. And I do think that it did have an impact on the regulation. And yeah, I mean, we have a role, especially like again in nascent ecosystems. Support structures do have a role because they are an amazing voice that catalyzes the needs of entrepreneurs and makes sure that policies, if they are to be developed, make sense and are adapted to the needs of their main beneficiaries, which are like the economic players.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And with regards to, I want to touch on some of the programs that Open Startup offers specifically, so the audience knows what you guys actually do. And the one I want to start off with is, let's say, the OSTX program, which is the from idea to startup. So it's a 4-week program that you guys run. Can you just run us through how that initially works for someone who wants to go into that program?
Yeah. So we have indeed like our programs are articulated in 5 main ones that kind of follow the life cycle of the entrepreneurs and the different types of needs that they have. OSTX is a fail fast program. It's a program for people who don't have time to dedicate 4 months to a program where they also need physical presence. It can be online, but also in person. And in a way, it's 9 different steps that go from what is my idea? Do I really have a problem that I'm trying to solve? What does the persona of my beneficiary look like? And so we kind of get the entrepreneur to quickly go through the checklist that allows the person after the trainings to continue to have a bit of mentoring still and to decide quite quickly if they consider that this idea is worth continuing, or they might say, really, this is not for me and I don't want to go there and I'm not ready for this. And to be honest, like, we love it because we do see more than 50% who end up saying, no, we don't want to do it. And this is perfect because they wouldn't have lost too much time. And it's also a way for us to identify talents that then we can say, listen, you don't want to build your venture, but how about you join an innovative company or a startup? And that's like how we also catalyze African talents that we try to introduce. And that's why, like, we have an important dynamic, which is like employability, career path, high added value jobs, where we consider that engineer who ended up not being ready to be an entrepreneur can be an amazing employee working for a startup. So we do it for, I would say, this double objective: getting people to decide if they don't want to go there, supporting them if they want to, and then opening this appetite so that eventually we get also talent to match with our community of startups.
Which is perfect, because that's a perfect way to find other co-founders that are maybe not startup. They're not ready to start their own startup, but they're ready to join another venture within the startup ecosystem as well. So I want to touch on two other flagship programs, which is the Paper Plane Accelerator program, which empowers startups to scale globally, which is probably one of the biggest issues for any startup, is the notion of getting scale ready. How do you guys go about nurturing startups to get to that point?
So actually, I'm gonna go, if you don't disagree, I'd rather tell you, like, when looking at the startups that we help grow internationally, we have 3 programs. Paper Plane is the wild program. It is the only program where we don't have an educational program. It is that kid that doesn't respect the rules. Paper Plane is, we've built it because we were seeing so many startups telling me, listen, I'm fed up with an educational program. I think I've run through already 2 or 3 programs, and I just want support to grow into other countries and to find investors. So the way we do it, it's a very quick online program where we bring startups from across Africa. And it's a DIY, a do-it-yourself method, where what we do is the pathway. We tell them, now you're going to sit together, you're going to challenge your business models. And every one of you going into a different country, if there's someone from that country, how can we help them? Who are the corporates that are there? Who are the VCs who are there? What's the competition there? And then at one point, it's like, okay, now let's look at the VC roadmap of everyone. Who knows people? Who can introduce? And after that, it culminates into one big event called the Global Immersion Week, where we also promote an African country. Every year, it's a country. We did Tunisia 2 times, Morocco last year. This year, we're still negotiating. But the objective is to take those entrepreneurs, and we usually have 20 investors that we handpick because we think that they might be interested, and we get them to do what we're good at, becoming friends. We take them 3 days in a safe space where they have breakfast together, dinner together, they dance together, they discover the ecosystem of that country, and they get to meet in a way that is human beings that connect and might say, I really like the spirit of this startup. The percentage of partnerships, relationships that are built through those, through the Paper Plane and Global Immersion Week are quite unique. It's a community builder type of program where, I mean, we really try to we just offer the space where people get to meet, and we don't intervene too much. We let them do the job. So that's for Paper Plane. Grow and Brain are programs that are there to support startups in getting their first million, one into deep tech and one into everything but deep tech. And in general, I would say, O'Brien, it's like always 4 components. Strong educational programs that are tailor-made, a lot of coaching where we really have a huge set of coaches that we really spend a lot of time identifying who's going to be amazing for this startup. And then we have fellowships where we get startups to have a bit of money to hire, and international exposure. We spend a lot of money to get startups to travel, and we find ways to give them a visa so that they see the world. And that's something that, I mean, I could spend an hour talking about that, but like, there is no way that Africa grows if Africa is not connected to the world, and the whole world is the same.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think with my time within the European ecosystem, there's this notion of Africa is the place to be. And a lot of individuals within the European ecosystem are trying to get into the African market. But with the African market being such a unique market, you kind of need to be connected with the players within the market. You can't just come in and try to disrupt the ecosystem within Africa, because each country has its own unique ecosystem. So you need to be connected with the players within that space. So kind of building these bridges is the only way to go about kind of forming this unique cohesive ecosystem that works both ways, which I think is quite an exciting that's been happening currently.
And in here, I was probably just listening lately to a colleague of mine who did a great presentation at the G7 summit, saying that today when we look at Africans, generally because of the visa issues, because of the migration issues, unfortunately, the story isn't a nice one. But we do believe that in the upcoming 20 years, Africans are going to have to go to the other world because they need to work, because they are the youngest population, because they are going to be the talent of tomorrow.
Yeah, which is true. And I want to speak specifically on the BRAIN program that you guys run that looks at deep tech, which is this innovative ecosystem where it looks at AI, which is the buzzword amongst startups currently, which will continue being the buzzword amongst startups going into the future. How specifically does the program work, and how do you guys cater towards filtering programs coming into the BRAIN program?
So BRAIN is something that I would say it's a program that imposed itself because scientists came to see us and say, guys, I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff. How can we be included in your system? So we included them in OST at first, and it was horrible. It's like the time of, the culture is different. The behavior is different. The types of needs of scientists were different. So slowly, it took us 5 years to really articulate a value proposition that adapted to the sciencepreneurs. BRAIN it's another team. It's another logo. It's another marketing. It's other partners. It's like, see it as a real business unit inside OST. And I should call it a social unit because it's more a cost unit than anything else. And it is an amazing cost unit. It's an amazing investment where what we do is, one, we do BRAIN X's, which is same thing than an OSTX, but for scientists, just to get them to say, okay, maybe I might want to build something. And then we have an accelerator that lasts a year. And in this accelerator, it's a Pan-African cohort where we bring MIT the MBA executive education, but also MIT Africa, and also a lot of our network. And I think that what makes BRAIN unique is precisely because it's a platform. So to give you an example, when we do run our boot camps, we have partners in France, Agora Nov, Digital Africa, BPI France. We have partners in Saudi. We have partners in the US. We have partners in Africa. So we try to take a lot of people that go there to really shake the tree, to get these entrepreneurs to meet with a lot of people to say, oh, wow, there's something happening. And what I'm doing is not isolated. I'm doing something that has a meaning and that has an impact. So after the educational program, we do a lot of mentoring and post-program education and a lot of international exposure. For instance, this year, I think we had startups go to Boston, MIT, to Morocco, to France, to Kenya. We had like not less than 4 or 5 visits. And I know that some of the entrepreneurs told us we've never traveled. It's the first time, and we traveled 4 or 5 countries in like 6 months. And what I can tell you is over the 9 finalists, 5 fundraised between 200 and 1.5 million in 5 months. So what we thought would be a platform to kind of bring the support, make sure that they're embedded in a community, ended up showing that there are ways to get the startups to be investment ready. And it's very simple. It's like, how are you ready for the marathon? Have to run, have to eat properly. You have to have a community of people that run with you on Sundays and probably Saturdays. And once you start that game, you just become someone who's running a marathon. You're not from Africa. You're not from the US. You speak the same language. You understand where technology is. You understand what's going on in different areas of the world. And you simply become a citizen of the world and a deep scientist of the world. And that's what we try to do with BRAIN.
Yeah, which is great. And you spoke about tailoring these programs to different issues. How does Open Startup as an organization go about looking at the different issues within the African ecosystem and finding startups that are solving those unique different issues within the African system?
We have the chance to be, I would say, supported by a partner that I would like to name here because they have been absolutely amazing, which is Africa Grow at KfW. And what they said, and it's very rare to have a partner that tells you, listen, we want you to understand the needs and we want to support you and we're going to trust you in what you think should be done. So as part of all the programs, we have a lot of activities that are into ecosystem where we go to the country, we train people. So I'll give you an example. When we do our training of trainers, and we did it in Senegal, in Morocco, in Tunisia, we invite everyone, the startups, the support structures, the VCs. And the most important part is getting to understand what's going on locally. And based on that, we understand we have this luxury of doing like a lot of countries every year where we quickly meet everyone. And that allows us to constantly remember that we are not there to tick boxes. We are not there to serve agendas. We are there because we are listening to a market and we genuinely try to understand what is needed now. And that's why we've been changing in 9 years. We've had chapters of 3 years. In the beginning, we were a competition. And then we understood that the entrepreneurs said, guys, help us go international. So we walked the talk and we decided to go to Africa so that we get it ready for them. And then they told us, guys, we need a deep tech program. So we built Brain. And then they said, we want investment readiness. So we never did it because there was a financial interest in doing it. We did it without knowing if we could have the possibility to have funding for this. But we were advocating very loudly to say, we know that that's what the country wants. And so far we have been trusted. And I think that it's been a more tough exercise, but I think that that's the way to go. And I'm really proud of what we've been accomplishing on that side. And I feel like I can really tell you that I feel comfortable that we are identifying the needs and we're trying to serve them the right way.
Yeah, with Africa having such a unique perspective on different cultures, different religion, different issues apart from the global South or global West, where African issues can only be solved by Africans. And one of the other things I want to touch on is the notion of value addition in terms of the ecosystem of Africa itself, where we need to kind of develop more value addition in our own products rather than exporting things out and then value getting added to it. What do you think? What strategies can Africa implement to create a more value-added economy rather than the current situation where we are exporting more than we are actually bringing into our respective economies?
So, my number one and very important argument there is the importance for Africa to join forces. Like, you cannot position as a global force if you are not talking to your neighbors. And if you look at this historically, Europe very quickly after World War II has already, even in World War I, has developed this beginning of exercise to say, France, Germany, we have to create peace and prosperity. And for that, we're going to create the European Union. And it took them time, but that made them a very strong and bold player. United States is another bold player. China is What about Africa? What are the countries doing today to, for instance, align their policies when it comes to the AI? What are the countries doing today, for instance, to make sure that we identify which country has what so that we can get deep tech to foster very quickly? We can say, if you want a supercalculator, you go to Morocco. But then if you want to do AI, make sure that South Africa is embarked because they have the talent. And this exercise of joining the African countries and doing it genuinely, because there's an interest and because it is important to have one single voice that negotiates. That for me is, you can't do anything if you continue to be fragmented. And we have an interest in doing that one. The second one is really explaining and advocating this new narrative, which is Africa is not a problem. Africa is the only solution to feed the population, to make sure that we have the task force that is going to work when everyone else is going to become very old. And also because if we do not get Africa to enter in the arena now, in 50 years, Africa is going to grow old. Good luck to save the planet when Africans are not part of the added value and part of the workforce. So I think that there are different ways, but also there are nice ways to explain that Africa is ready to build the talent, ready to be part of the carbon print and make sure that we are contributing to reducing pollution. Africa is ready to host a lot of farming for the food that the world needs. So I do think that today we have many elements. It's like a diamond that hasn't been cut. And it is a real responsibility today of organizations like the African Union to be very strategic in the way it's going to position in the international negotiations in general.
Which is true. And on the aspect of Africa having this youthful element to it, how can we as Africans harness this youthful? Because if you look at the African population, we have 60% of our population that's under 25, which is one of the youngest populations in global in terms of the world itself. But at the same time, we sit with one of the worst youth unemployment rates globally as well as a continent. So given that, how can Africa like harness its youthful dynamic into becoming this economic power that drives the African economy forward?
To sound like it's too easy, and I am naively telling you that it is so, I'm not saying easy, but it is obvious. That is, today we have African people. So one, it's not going to be through universities. Today, we need 100 times more universities in Africa to be able to contain all the youth that need to be inside this infrastructure. So today, we need one, alternative education. We need edtech models that are really offering an alternative education to youth. We need vocational training. And I think that there are so many ways today to really enroll our youth into trainings that might equip them with the right skills. We need to have international openness. We need to enroll more young people in international projects. We need to have more fellowships for people to go and engage internationally. And we need more startups. We need more of those. I would say even a startup as being a school of life. I'm okay if they fail. Just see it as an investment to get people to learn very quickly after 3-4 years, technology, being a team player, being able to pitch, being able to fundraise. And then once you get this talent, you can work for a company. For instance, in the programs that we've done, and I'll share this number with you. We've trained around 3,000 young Africans. 97% of them work. Whether they built their venture or they're working for another venture, but they're not unemployed very simply because they know how to address the right value prop. They know how to sell their CVs. They know how to find the company because they've been exposed. It's a matter of exposure. So I really think that it's going to be about alternative education, offering international opportunities as well, having a role of the diaspora. The diaspora, to be honest, can do really much better. And Africa needs to take also its own responsibility. It is not just the Western world that is there to help Africa. Africa needs to be a strong player that has a vision, that has an intentionality, that is able to negotiate with their neighbors to be able to save that important population that is the population of the world, that is our engine in the upcoming 50 years.
Yeah, which is true. And when we near the end of our conversation, I have a few other questions I would ask you. With Open Startup itself as an organization, what are the future plans that you foresee within the organization? And what initiatives do you see within the African ecosystem kind of leading this new growth of startups that are currently happening within the continent?
I think that today, if we're looking what we will be doing will depend again on what the market will tell. What we know more or less like main, I would say, trends is we will continue and we will reinforce our investment readiness programs. We will reinforce our deep tech programs, and we might want to add a layer of financing, not necessarily through a fund. Could be a catalytic fund, could be some grants, could be some loans, but like something that would add some funding. And finally, we will clearly add ourselves more AI to make sure that we're optimizing the decisions and the resources that we're offering to startups. When it comes now to what's happening in Africa and the initiatives, I think that today there's a mushrooming of VC funds. And VC funds that are going to struggle also because small funds, oftentimes 10, 20 millions, not necessarily super profitable, and that are all going to be looking for the pipeline of startups. I think that today there is a great opportunity for support structures and VC funds to ally their forces to better prepare the startups and help the VCs do better investments. There is a real opportunity for startups also to merge and acquire one another and partner together. I think that what we are going to see now is really more partnerships between startups. And in terms of initiatives, the initiatives that I think today are like interesting are all those initiatives that consist into like building more AI hubs that are into training the VCs so that the VCs are extremely good. And here I'm thinking of an initiative that I really admire, which is Dream VC and what they're doing. And there's going to be only a place for the SSOs that are strong enough to demonstrate that are really contributing into preparing the startups into their investment. So I do think there's going to be a big change in the landscape, and we will see some dilutions and some probably also mergers between the SSOs, because we will need to join forces to complement, to make sure that we're doing a better job.
And one last thing, like this is the question I generally ask everyone, as someone who's been in the entrepreneurship space, as coached in, some founders, what advice would you give to anyone inspiring to be an entrepreneur? That's kind of like, oh, I have this idea, but I don't know what steps I need to take in order to be kind of take the next step to kind of fully be in the space.
I would say, I mean, the first one is how resilient are you? Go to the gym, find your friends, find ways to be mentally balanced. I mean, number one is your resilience. I think number two is loyalty and ethics. I'm really going to put that one there because it's a long-term game. You can't hit and run. You can probably do it one time, but you have to go for the tough game, which is the long-term one where your reputation is key. And probably the third advice is don't open up to the world and make sure that you speak about your idea. I see a lot of entrepreneurs telling me, oh, they're going to copy me. I'm like, if it's copyable, it means you can just give up from now. So it's like, you have to sit with people and talk about your idea constantly, because your strength is about the army that you're going to have with you, accompanying you on this journey. So you have to be likable. You have to be inspiring. You have to sit and say, okay, what is the story that I'm going to tell people so that I can have a lot of support? Because without an army, you can't do it. It's like there's no way to succeed if you don't have great advisors, great partners, a fan club, employees that love the idea, able to get people to love what you're doing. It's going to be very hard. So I'd say those three ones.
Good advice. I think I spoke to one founder once, and he was like, if you want to be a founder, you have to get married with your idea specifically. Like it has to become your baby. Like day and night, you have to think, sleep on that thing. Like that's the only way to be a founder. And if you can't do that, then you can't be an entrepreneur. And he was like insisting, like you have to be, like it's your thing. And that's like the thing that you focus on.
But you also need to know when to drop it. Because like sometimes if you go, you have to stop and do something else or change or pivot. So I totally agree. But I think that that's the difficulties. You have to be balanced. You have to know when to battle, when to step back, when to be tired, when to rest, when to go out there and when to really just stop seeing people and work like a dog. It's like there's a lot of balance in the things that you do. It's also a matter of balance. And being, I think, experienced, slowly acquire this experience to know how to steadily progress in this amazing adventure.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The funny thing, this is it from us. Thank you so much for giving some of your time to be here.